Welcome back, boxing fans. It's crazy how some people just literally want to make everything about race. Jerome Boots Ennis just signed with DAZN. Hasn't had his first fight under Matchroom and DAZN yet. Just signed with them. Has spent all his previously years fighting on PBC undercards as a guy that was promoted and managed by Showtime. For years and years, he was highlighted by the best promotional company for Black American fighters. Yet, they could not get him a world title fight, even within the PBC. They couldn't get him big name opponents, even within the PBC. But now that Jerome Boots Ennis is part of Matchroom and DAZN, now all of a sudden, this is becoming a race issue. Racist fans don't want Jerome Boots Ennis to be successful. We want him to be a failed success. And the irony is the person that's coming out with this load of bullshit is a guy that literally has been criticized by Black American boxing fans for being a Jerome Boots Ennis hater. This is a guy that put out videos talking about all kinds of dudes at 147 that Boots Ennis should fight and would beat him. Example, like Speedy Rashidi Ellis, who we saw got beat by Villa, a guy that Boots Ennis destroyed. Anyone that really watched boxing never really felt that Speedy Ellis had any fucking hope in hell of beating Jerome Ennis. He was much older. His resume was much worse. He hadn't done anything. He didn't have the power. There was no chance he was ever going to beat Boots Ennis. And only after Boots Ennis really proved that did this guy then start to jump on the Boots Ennis fan wagon. And now he's saying, oh, these so-called boxing fans don't want Boots Ennis to get big fights. We don't want Boots Ennis to get big fights. I mean, when we're talking about Boots Ennis potentially fighting Devin Haney, this guy came out and said, people are hating on Devin Haney. They're trying to put him in fights with Boots Ennis. Boots Ennis, who you don't fucking rate. So what's the problem? If Devin Haney is a pound-for-pound number 2 fighter in boxing and wants to go up to 147, then what's the problem with him fighting Jerome Boots Ennis? Seems like a no fucking brainer to me, right? And then, of course, when Tank Davis is clout chasing and doing this, and people say, okay, go fight fucking Boots Ennis. All people are hating on Tank Davis. They want him to go all the way to 147 and fight Jerome Boots Ennis. So that would literally be Tank Davis's 4th weight division. There's plenty of fighters in the world who fought in 4 weight divisions, right? The irony is this guy just came out with a video today saying Jerome Boots Ennis is almost 30 years old and you know, he doesn't have that much time. Well, actually, he's 26. The same age as Shakur Stevenson. He's literally a fight or 2 away from being on the pound-for-pound list, literally, right? All he needs is the right opponent, and inevitably, he is going to rise onto the pound-for-pound list. And at that time, this guy's probably going to put him in the top 3, right? You know, because, of course, he'll use him to try to continue to push that Black dominance type of BS that he consistently pushes when he just wants to highlight Black American fighters and shit on everybody else and literally go out of his way to downplay and dismiss every other fighter that's not Black American and yet highlight Black American fighters who have yet to do anything. I mean, the reality is the majority of boxing fans rate Boots Ennis and think him signing with Matchroom was a great deal. Great for Matchroom because now they have a potential pound-for-pound superstar in their stable, that American fighter that they were looking for to help them cross over to the American market. They're building him up, having him fight in Philadelphia. PBC didn't do that. PBC literally never put Jerome Boots Ennis in a fight card in Philadelphia to build up his hometown fan base. They didn't do that, which seems ridiculous when you say it out loud, but it's the reality. But now we're supposed to believe that anti-Black boxing fans want to look at Boots Ennis' demise. Whereas the only person who's consistently been talking about Boots Ennis' demise is this fucking guy, JB, right? Literally, you don't have to go far to listen to his video to see that he's just using this guy to push fucking rhetoric and fucking a narrative. Literally, it's ridiculous. Let's read some of the comments here. Lead Hand Media. Fucking terrible channel. One of the biggest fucking, literally, fucking trolls on YouTube, right? He says John Ennis should push for Virgil Ortiz, then Bud Crawford for the after the Anavisian fight. So he shouldn't go on and try to become an undisputed welterweight champion the way Bud Crawford did. No. He shouldn't do that. He should go after Virgil Ortiz. Why? Well, because these guys want to make everything racial, right? They want to prove that the Black American fighter is better than the Mexican American fighter. And they want to create this black and white division so they can continue to push this bullshit on their channels, right? Just for clicks and this kind of racial narrative that they consistently love to push on their channel. Virgil Ortiz moved to 154 because of health issues. And now he's at that weight division, and potentially there's a lot of great fights for him. He's in tough, right, with Bud Crawford up there. For Boots Ennis, the path is now clear. And for people that say people don't want Boots Ennis to get big fights, that's a load of shit. I mean, when he was at 147 and trying to get big fights, the majority of people that tried to downplay and dismiss him were Errol Spence fans, many of whom tried to use him against Bud Crawford, even though he wasn't a mandatory for Bud Crawford. He had been, but then he left to become an Errol Spence mandatory. And these same people weren't in the same or didn't have the same energy for pushing for him to fight Errol Spence. Why? Because they were afraid. They didn't want Errol Spence to come up with a guy they really see as dangerous, but they were hoping that he would fight Bud Crawford and potentially get Bud Crawford out of the way for Errol Spence so that it would no longer be an Errol Spence issue. But that didn't work, and Errol Spence got his ass beat down. And Boots Ennis now has a clear path to become an undisputed 147-pound fighter, beating Mario Barros, beating fucking Howard, who just made a huge statement in his big fight for the WBO, beat Stanionis, which would be a fucking great fight. Those 3 wins right there, right, would be huge. And those are the fights he should be chasing. You don't need to be a young fighter who's never fought really anybody top 10 yet and be trying to call out all the biggest names in boxing when you haven't even beat the guys in and around your level. You beat your Stanionis. That's a great fight. Stanionis is a monster. He's very aggressive, hard puncher, good amateur pedigree, and a very stand-up European-style fighter. Howard just showed fucking great power, endurance, dog mentality in him, right? That would be a great fight. You let Howard defend that WBO title and really look as impressive as he did against what's-his-face, Santillan. And then a fight between him and Boots will be huge, right? And then, of course, you have Mario Barros. Mario Barros is coming off of a win over Ugis. He won his world title or earned his world title legitimately, right? By beating ex-world champions and top-rated fighters. And so him against Boots would be great. Boots becomes undisputed at 147, becomes a pound-for-pound top 10 fighter. You got guys moving up from 140, Taylor, Ramirez, Prograis, Haney, Ryan Garcia. I mean, say what you will. A few of those fighters have real name credibility. And to get in there with Boots Ennis, it would really continue to build up his resume, build up his name, continue to build his Philadelphia fan base, and continue to move him up the pound-for-pound list. This is how you build a fighter. This is how you do it. And you know this is exactly what Matchroom is going to do. Matchroom is not afraid to put great fighters in with great opponents. That's why so many of their champions end up getting beat, because they're not trying to cherry pick opponents. They're not trying to put their fighters in safe fights to build them up in a not unconventional manner, but in a illegitimate manner where they look like there's something, right? But to real boxing fans, they know they haven't really done anything yet. There's still questions to be asked and questions to be answered. For Boots Ennis, if he beats Stanionis and Howard and Barrios, people are going to be like, that dude is a fucking monster, especially if he does what we expect him to do, go in there and fucking destroy them, right? Then you destroy fucking Haney, you destroy fucking Ryan Garcia. He still has huge name recognition. That would be a huge fight, big name on his resume, a potential pay-per-view fight for a young fighter trying to make money and build his name and build his recognition. Then you move up to 154, try to become a two-weight world champion, and depending on who's there at that time, probably Spence and Bud Crawford won't be, but he doesn't need to live off of fucking older fighters who've done their own legacy. He needs to build his own legacy, right? In a holistic manner. But it's just this whole narrative to come out and literally act like, literally what his title of this video is: John Ennis will become the next Demetrius Andrade. The next Demetrius Andrade. I mean, the irony with this statement is Demetrius Andrade could have had a huge fight with the PBC at 154 pounds, but he ducked that fight against Charlo and then went on to fucking fight no legitimate world champions at 154 pounds. Move up to 160, continued to fucking not fight any legitimate world champions. Was put in line to fight Billy Joe Saunders, but unfortunately that fight fell through. That would have been a huge fight for his career. Then, of course, he was moved up to 168, and finally he got the fight he wanted. A big fight against a big-name opponent, a potential legacy fight against David Benavidez. And what happened? He literally looked like dog shit, got his ass beat from fucking pillar to post, and now is an afterthought at 168 pounds. So outside of clout chasing people and never ever fighting a world champion until literally you got your ass knocked out by David Benavidez, who's really a one-dimensional fighter and not fucking that special. As Floyd Mayweather said, no special effects. You got beat by a dude with no special effects as a fucking long, awkward southpaw. You literally gave David Benavidez no fucking issues at all. None. But you want to compare Boots Ennis to him. This is a guy that was an Olympian, went into the pros, and the way he was maneuvered was to duck and dodge and fucking cherry pick and win vacant titles and then crown yourself as the best, even though literally when you look at your resume, it's dog shit. Dog shit. But now we want to downplay Boots Ennis. And it's the same with Andrade. Andrade spent the majority of his career not with Matchroom. But we want to criticize Matchroom as if somehow it's Matchroom's fault that Demetrius Andrade's career turned out to be shit. And now Boots Ennis, he's putting himself in position to potentially ruin his career. Whereas, his career had run so great prior with the PBC, never getting a world title fight, never fighting a top 10 opponent. Did he fight anybody that was a fucking a top opponent at all? Let's just cruise through and take a peek. So there he is, John Boots Ennis, 31-0, 28 KOs. This is a guy that a few years ago people knew was great. But our question was, when is the PBC and Showtime going to put him in fights that are really going to prove how good he truly is? He's 26 years old. That was back when he was like 23, 24. 5'10", 74-inch reach, great measurements for welterweight. A guy that could easily go to 154 and eventually 160. Above that, we'll have to wait and see. But I mean, to be a three-weight champion, the future looks bright. Now, of course, he's got a fight with David Avician, a very good opponent. Yet this is the same opponent that PBC, Errol Spence fans shit all over when Bud Crawford fought. But he was still a good opponent. He was a good opponent for Bud Crawford. He's a good opponent for Boots Ennis. Actually, he's a better opponent than fucking Crowley. Even though Crowley has no losses in his resume, he's not as good. He didn't have the best resume. He didn't fight the same level of opponents. Then he beat Roman Villa, Karen Kuczynchuk, Castile Clayton, my Canadian brethren, Thomas Delorme, Sergey Lipinets, right? That's not too bad. As of 2021, they started to put him in with solid opponents. Lipinets, who was an ex-world champion, right? Wasn't he a world champion at 140? Delorme, a rugged fighter who'd been in with tons of elite top fighters. Castile Clayton, an undefeated Canadian fighter. Chikatya, a difficult opponent, right? Ukrainian, stand-up boxer, a little slick, a little defensive, not so easy to get to. hence the reason he went 12 rounds and didn't let Boots Ennis look very good. Roman Villa, a hard-punching Mexican fighter with a big knockout record. And now David Avician, a veteran Russian fighter based out of the UK. Prior to that, Chris Van Heerden, Abreu, this kid. And then, none of those guys are really the kind of quality opponents he should have been fighting if you really wanted to build him up. But now he is where he is. Now he's here. Now the future is bright. And it's on Matchroom to make the fights. And he wants to downplay that and act like somehow Matchroom isn't going to be able to get him the big fights. Now that Saudi Arabia is in cahoots with Matchroom and is willing to spend so much money to make fights, somehow you act as if somehow this money isn't going to translate to Boots Ennis. Somehow Boots Ennis isn't going to be able to capitalize on this cash injection into Matchroom and into DAZN, which is obviously coming into the US in that Terrence Crawford California fight card, which is fucking a great card. But this is the kind of narrative some people love to push on their channels. Complete BS, complete bullshit. But what would you expect? Like, you have to ask yourself, with this weekend's fights coming up, with Tank Davis fighting Frank Martin, David Benavidez fighting Gvozdyk, why is this video coming out? And I asked this about non-black fighters as well as black fighters. Why is somebody making a video like this except just to push hate and racist fucking agenda? Because there's no need to make this video. It's irrelevant. It's pointless. What you should be talking about is how the fighter you've been praising so much in Frank Martin is going to go out there and fucking beat Tank Davis's ass. And how now David Benavidez, who you always thought was not as good as Caleb Plant, is going to go in there and beat Gvozdyk. And you should really be shitting on David Benavidez for fighting Gvozdyk. An inactive fighter, fucking old, coming out of 4 years of retirement, who's been fighting pure bums. Because if it was Lomachenko, Golovkin, Canelo Alvarez, Inouye, Romy Gonzalez, a whole list of other non-black fighters, that's what you would be doing. You'd be literally be making multitudes of videos shitting on them, like you did recently against the Puerto Rican kid. You made like 4 or 5 videos related to this kid who most people see as still a prospect. He did his first big step-up fight, and all you could do was try to hype up somebody else off of his name and downplay and discredit him. Which, this is consistently what you do. This is what you are. You're a fucking hater. That's it, straight up, right? Because if you were really concerned about boxing, you'd be fucking talking about boxing. You wouldn't be making this racist propaganda video trying to somehow act as if now Boots Ennis' career is ruined because he's no longer with the PBC. Even though with the PBC, he literally did fucking nothing. I just read his resume for you. You tell me, what top PBC fighters did he face? There's a long list of dudes he could have fought. Thurman, fucking Garcia, Spence, Porter, and many others, right? Who even knows? He could have pulled in the retread fighters like fucking Guerrero and Berto. Those guys would have been good tests for a young fighter. Good name recognition, experience, right? He could have fought all those dudes. And how much further would his resume be? How much bigger of a star would he be right now if literally that's what happened with him? But because he wasn't really part of the PBC, he was kind of in the shadow land. The PBC didn't throw any of those fighters towards him. Even though they had a relationship with Showtime and they were hoping that potentially he would sign with them, they still didn't throw him a bone. They still literally treated him as if he was a second-class citizen within the PBC. Because you think of these fighters I just listed, Vila, Chikachian, Clayton, Delorme, Lipinets. Lipinets is probably the only guy of PBC heritage with any recognition that he fought. Heron, Abreu, fucking these dudes. None of these guys are PBC fighters, right? Because you know what I'm talking when I'm saying PBC fighters. Guys that literally have been retreaded consistently throughout the fucking PBC. We see it happening right now at 160 pounds. They're literally retreading fucking the dude to fight Carlos Adames, moving him up from 154 to 160, retreading this fucking PBC fighter to put him back in this division to fight a guy who's bigger than him, to give him a name opponent, an in-house PBC fighter. Right now, we can read BoxRec's pound for pound list. You can see them right here. I mean, obviously Spence is out of this picture. Crawford's out. But you got Ryan Garcia. I know he's got obviously PED issues and this and that going on. But the truth is, if you asked Boots Ennis tomorrow if him and his team wanted to fight Ryan Garcia next, they'd be all over that fight, just the same way Tank Davis and Devin Haney were, because they realize that it's a winnable fight, yet it's a big pay-per-view fight. And for a young kid like him, this would be the perfect first opponent to do your first pay-per-view. Then you got a guy like Conor Benn, another potentially good fight. I don't know how that does on pay-per-view in the States, but nonetheless, Jin Sasaki, tough Japanese fighter. Obviously, you know, there's not much point for this fight unless it's a mandatory. Mario Barros, a great opponent. One of these in-house PBC fighters who continuously recycle throughout the PBC. But he's still only 29 years old, only 2 losses in his resume. Sakram Gizioff, yes, probably not going to happen. Brian Norman, he's obviously with Top Rank. But for a unification fight, this 23-year-old fighter, Brian Norman Jr., against fucking Jerome Boots Ennis, that would be a great fight. Right? Solomon Suzuka, the French fighter out of Canada, 32 years old, an Olympian, 17-0, a guy who's been waiting, just like Boots Ennis, for a big opportunity. And right now, a big opportunity would be Boots Ennis. That would be a great fight. I know soft core boxing fans, like this dude, who doesn't really talk about boxing, but only pushes race, he probably wouldn't even really talk about this fight because he probably doesn't know who Solomon Suzuka is. But it's a great fight. Stanionis, fucking great fight. David Abisian, right there at number 12, great opponent. Obviously, you know, a guy who's past his best, but still, as a replacement opponent, very solid. Lewis Crocker, English fighter, I have no idea who he is. Karen Duchakian, the highest ranked fighter on his resume at number 14. Mbenga, Santillan, Raul Corral, down the road, Raul Corral would be a great opponent. 15-0, 28 years old, some power. Obviously, he has that built-in Mexican fan base. You throw a guy like Alexis Rocha, if he was actually coming off of a good win, something successful, he'd be a great opponent. Still only 26. Ugis, he is one of those shot PBC fighters you want to see recycled. So he might be usable, right? If he can get a decent win under his resume. Maybe fight that other long Minnesota PBC fighter that was the WBA regular champion. Fight him, beat him, look impressive again, and then maybe you could do that fight. Kavalaskis, solid. Paddy Donovan, he got robbed in his last fight, but still, right? There's quite a few opponents within this division that would make very good potential opponents for Boots Ennis, right? But you just have to let guys develop, let fights develop, and then make them. Even a fucking Blair Cobb right now, coming off of a win against fucking Adrian Broner, as ridiculous as that sounds, coming off of a win versus Adrian Broner definitely puts Blair Cobb in a position where, because of his big mouth, like Rolly Romero, he could literally talk himself into a fight with Boots Ennis. And Boots is so young with such a limited resume, this would be a potentially great fight to push forward. I'd be eager to see him do it. I don't think it's a complicated fight or one that he's going to lose. But you know fucking Blair Cobb is going to talk a load of BS, and he's literally going to sell that fight. And for a guy like Boots Ennis, that's money in the bank, and that's exactly what he needs. So I don't know why you make a video pushing this racial bullshit when you could just literally make a video talking about who you'd like to see him fight, what do you think he could do to move forward in his career, and what do you think would be the best moves for Matchroom to do with him. See, that would probably be the boxing way of having this conversation. But no. Leave it to you to make it a racial video about us versus them. You can't make this shit up. This is the problem with American boxing. It's full of a bunch of fucking idiots like this. A bunch of dudes that are fucking just racist and don't really care about the sport, but care more about what narrative they can push. Today is Friday. You don't make videos talking about Tank Davis and the pay-per-view card versus Frank Martin, a fighter that you've been pushing like fucking crazy. Lomachenko doesn't deserve a world title fight, but Frank Martin does. Frank Martin, who hasn't even fought a top 10 fucking 135 pounder, a guy who arguably lost his last fight against an unknown fucking German kid, the same guy that Shakur is going to fight. I wonder if Shakur is going to kick his ass better than than Frank Martin. I bet he does. I bet he does. And I wonder how long he's going to last with Tank. The way he flinched at the fucking weigh-in, I'll be lucky if he lasts fucking 4 rounds. And then how good is he going to be? How good is he going to look when Tank Davis knocks him out in fucking 4 rounds? Then all the hype, all the blister, all the fucking smoke blowing up his ass for a 30-year-old prospect who hasn't fought a top 10 opponent, how's that going to fucking look on you? So I understand now probably why you're not making a video, because you don't want to have this blow up in your face when the dude gets exposed as just not that fucking good. But, you know, this isn't here to hate on Frank Martin. I just feel confident that Tank Davis is going to beat his ass. Tank Davis's resume might not be the best, but it's fucking better than Frank Martin. Way better. But you can stay tuned to tomorrow's video where I'm going to be breaking down Tank Davis's resume, because apparently we're all wrong. And Tank Davis's resume is fucking elite, because in the last 8 fights, the guys he fought only have 4 losses in their resume. I mean, imagine if we said that about Stephen Fulton, the guy who fought 8 undefeated fighters on his resume. How did that fucking play out? Just like I said it would. People giving fucking dudes with undefeated records a bunch of fucking credit. But yet when you look at the resumes, they hadn't fought anyone. So of course they haven't been beaten. You can't get beat if you don't fight fucking anybody. That's the whole point. Just because your record is 28-0 doesn't mean you're fucking good. It just means you're untested, right? In 99% of the fucking cases. But I could be wrong. Maybe Tank Davis's resume is way better than I give him credit for. I mean, God knows Rolly Romero's fucking career has really aged well. But leave your comments below. Do you think, in all honesty, that it would have been a better move for Boots Ennis to sign with the PBC, a boxing promotion that's literally put out 3 fights in the first 6 months of the year? 3 fight cards in the first 6 months of the year. So it would have been better for him to fight under them than it is to fight under Matchroom, who've literally put out probably 26 fucking fight cards over the same period of time, right? Like, I can guarantee you that Boots Ennis's next fight date is already scheduled. He's already talked to fucking my man Eddie Hearn, and Eddie Hearn says, you win this fight, this is the next date we got for you, and we'll see who we can find for that date. He's going to stay way more busy under Eddie Hearn than he ever was under the PBC. But let's just take a peek and see how busy he's been with the PBC and see if I'm full of shit or just lying, because maybe they have had him stay busy and I just missed out on it. But here we go. So here's his first fight. Obviously, it's July of 2024. I guarantee he's going to get 1 more fight before 2024 is done. And then he's probably going to fight 3 times in 2025. But in 2023, he fought twice, which wasn't bad. Vila and Chichakian. Neither of those fights were against a top 10 opponent. Neither one of those fights maneuvered him into one of the top fighters in the division. In 2022, he literally fought once against Custio Clayton, my great Canadian brethren. In 2021, he did fight twice, Delorme and Lipinets, probably the 2 biggest names in his career that he fought. So that definitely was a point where the PBC pushed him quite a bit, put him in with 2 good fights and the next world champion. Prior to that, he fought in 2000 3 times, right? 2019 twice, 18 4 times, 5 times. Look at that. 5 times in 2018. And then, you know, maybe the reason he only fought once in 2022 is because of COVID. Was COVID in 2022? I can't keep track. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And that would be a justified reason why he only fought once that year. But all that COVID time, it's kind of been lost on me. I literally don't even know what happened during that period of time. I was just living, and now it's done. And I kind of remember occasionally that we did go through COVID. When people say, when is the last time you've been to Canada? I think, 5, 6 years ago. Fuck, it's been a long time. Oh yeah, COVID. But leave your comments below. What do you think about Boots Ennis? What do you think his upside is? I mean, at 26, his career is almost done, according to JB, right? It's not like in the next 4 years, he's not going to be literally a pound for pound top 10 fighter and probably a 2-weight world champion. I can pretty much guarantee those 2 things are going to happen. That he's going to become a 2-weight world champion, balloons, and he's might possibly be an undisputed champion as well. So there's 3 historical type of things he could do to his resume, all under Matchroom. Because none of them were done under the PBC. Even him becoming a world champion wasn't really done under the PBC. It was done kind of in between, when he wasn't even really with a promoter. And he was elevated into that position right after Bud Crawford knocked out Errol Spence. The way the IBF manages things, who fucking knows, right? But leave your comments below. Let me know what you think about Boots Ennis. As I said, I think he is easily one of the top 10 fighters in boxing. But you need to have the fights. So why not clear out the 147-pound division, build your own legacy, and then move to 154 and continue to build on top of that? But we'll see. I'm sure when he does that, this guy's going to say he's pound for pound number 1. No other fighter is as good as him. And that may be true, but he's just waiting until that train is fucking out of the station before he jumps on it.